For the sake of national security, we urge the Senate to confirm Senator Hagel. We urge the Senate to confirm John Brennan and to get them to work, because the nation needs them to be at work.
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney urging the Senate to vote this week to confirm the president's nominees, Chuck Hagel for Defense and John Brennan for the CIA. And we're back now with the panel. Well, as we mentioned earlier, 15 Senate Republicans wrote to the president this week urging him to pull the Hagel nomination. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's against the nomination, demanded more information about various speeches, various comments that Chuck Hagel made. Bill, any way that they can block the Hagel nomination, or is he going to be confirmed this week?
They could block it, and I think it'll be a close vote for cloture on Tuesday morning, I guess. Senator Hagel has this whole archive of his audio and video of many of the speeches he's given. Some of these speeches there's been contention about what he actually said, but he's not opened that up at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So I think it's a legitimate issue for Republican senators to say, really, if Secretary of Defense is kind of an important job, could we look at these public documents, these audios and speeches he's given? Having said that, President Obama has done a good job of holding every Democratic senator to vote for a defense secretary whom they know is not the best choice for the job. But party loyalty sometimes trumps everything else in Washington.
You know, Mara, as I was talking about with Senator Coburn, you've got McCain, who voted to block. He says he's not going to vote this week to block. Richard Shelby of Alabama, he voted to block. He's not going to do that. It would seem, just on sheer mathematics, since the cloture only passed, or that was defeated by a single vote, with those two switches, Hagel gets through.
Yes, I think Hagel gets through. It's hard to see the math how the Republicans could block him. And then the question is, how damaged has he been by this whole process? I seem to think if he is damaged, he was damaged more by his own performance than by the votes against him. And he'll have to, make up for that. But, as he said, he doesn't make policy, and it's all coming from the White House anyway. So I think it's just all around an inauspicious beginning for a new defense secretary.
Nick, as you like to say, you live in the real world outside the Beltway. Is any of this about Hagel's comments, about Benghazi and the emails, we'll get to that in a second, about the policy on drone attacks, is any of that penetrating in the real world?
I think it is. I think that his hearings were so bad that sort of cut through out of this town and into where average folks are asking questions. Look, it's an impossibility for the White House to say with a straight face that this is the best choice at a critical time in what our country is facing for Chuck Hagel to run the Defense Department. It's an impossibility. Now, is it the president's prerogative? Absolutely. I think he'll be confirmed. But, this is like Andy Griffith actually turning Mayberry over to Barney. Like, it's okay to act like they're in charge. And I don't want to be rude, but Haley Barbour made a comment this week that I think is right. He said what's sad is in this second term, Obama's cabinet is starting to look more like a staff. It's people who are just going to do what he tells them to do. So I think what this pick is it's really the president making himself defense secretary at a time when we need a serious person over there like a Bob Gates or a Leon Panetta.
Senator Bayh, I want to pick up on something that Tom Coburn said. Assume that Hagel gets in. Has he been damaged by this process? Does it weaken his credibility and his clout on Capitol Hill? Does it weaken his ability to deal with all the competing power structures inside the Pentagon?
Well, the first impression was not positive as a result of the hearings, Chris, no doubt about that. So it is very imperative for the new defense secretary, Chuck will be confirmed, in his first public outing or two, to project the sense of command, gravitas, thoroughly briefed, in charge of the facts, to dispel this original impression that was created. After that, the challenge is going to be to assemble around himself a strong management team, because that's a big management responsibility in the Pentagon. They're going to be going through some changes and fiscal challenges, even without the sequester. And so ultimately the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. How does he perform as defense secretary? If he can come out of the blocks with a better impression, then not such a big deal. He can put this behind him.
Bill, one of the ways that the White House is trying to clear the path for two nominees, both Hagel at Defense and Brennan at CIA, is that they have kind of grudgingly being dragged out, have agreed to release some of the emails that chart how the talking points were developed after the Benghazi terror attack, from the time of the attack until Susan Rice went on the 5 Sunday shows 5 days later and said that it was all a spontaneous demonstration in reaction to the anti-Islamic video. What do you expect the senators to find?
I don't know, but I'd like to see them. They're not classified emails. These are emails about the PR performance after the attack, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be made public. And let us judge whether Mr. Brennan was honest or whether he used his position in the White House to politicize the talking points that we used to explain this tragedy.
Do you think that there's, I mean, the fact that they're releasing them would seem to indicate
But they're only giving to the Senate Intelligence Committee, I think, and to various...
Well, I understand, but that's giving it to everybody in a sense. I would think that there are no smoking guns there or they wouldn't release them. I would think.
I think better of the Obama administration than that, Chris. I think they just feel. It's
I would think
maybe
that
you're not aware.
Doubt, hey, the DNC says we got to take Al Qaeda out.
Maybe you're not aware. It's the most transparent administration in history, Chris. They just like to make things public and tell us how the basis of their decision making on that night. Well, you know, the truth is that the mainstream media thinks, oh, how could you focus on Benghazi all these months? People like me and Steve Hayes and others. I mean, the fact is, the more we learn, the more the initial suspicions turned out to be correct. The president totally took a hike that night in terms of giving any serious guidance. Afterwards, they seem to have politicized the way in which they interpreted it. There were failures beforehand. Benghazi was as much of a scandal, turns out to have been as much of a scandal as some of us suspected all along.
Mara?
Yeah, I think the White House is pretty confident there's nothing in there that's going to blow up in their face. I don't think they'd be doing it otherwise. And I think both of these guys are going to be confirmed. And, you know, Brennan, I think, never faced any serious opposition.
Senator Bai, meanwhile, the U.S. and our allies are going to sit down in Kazakhstan on Tuesday with Iran to discuss once again the nuclear program for the first time. I was astonished to see this since last June. And all of this comes at a time when Iran is tripling its centrifuge capacity so that it can enrich uranium even faster. What do you think of the chances for any progress there?
I would be skeptical about the chances for progress, Chris. I think the important thing to remember is the Iranians respect strength. Talking to them is one thing, but we got to keep the sanctions on and let them know that ultimately we will just not tolerate them becoming a nuclear weapons power. That's all they appreciate and understand.
But if they're tripling their centrifuge capacity, the sanctions we put in don't seem to have
they're imposing real economic hardship on the country. But if you look at the supreme leader there, he's fairly contemptuous of the West. He thinks that we're weak, that their capacity to endure hardship is greater than ours, and that they could just kind of wait this out and he'll ultimately get what he wants, which is a nuclear capability. That's the message that we need to counteract and say, we're going to make this as hard on you as we possibly can, and if push comes to shove, we'll do something about this. But he's got to believe it.
And speaking of push coming to shove, I remember Netanyahu, you know, with the cartoon bomb at the UN and drawing the red line. We're getting to the red line probably by summer, aren't we?
I wish Evan Bayh were Defense Secretary, not Chuck Hagel, because Evan Bayh believes and has said over the years...
Well, there go my chances.
Yeah, well, I know, they were very high anyway. I like to endorse you every now and then for things to make sure you can continue to be a valued panelist here on Fox News Sunday.
But your thought?
I think Israel faces a very difficult decision, and I think they've said repeatedly they cannot tolerate an Iranian nuclear weapon, and I think if they are confident that the Obama, Biden, Hagel, Kerry administration is not going to act, they may have to act.
Thank you, panel. See you next